The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Riverside Concert Hall, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Young musicians filled the waiting area, some practicing finger exercises in the air, others humming scales under their breath. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. This wasn't just any music competition. This was the National Youth Music Competition, the kind of event that could change a young musician's life forever. In the corner, a 12-year-old girl sat quietly beside her mother. Her name was Maya, and while other kids fidgeted nervously with their sheet music, she sat perfectly still. Her white cane rested against the chair next to her, folded neatly. Her fingers moved silently on her lap, practicing passages only she could hear. Maya had been blind since birth, but if you watched her carefully, you'd notice something remarkable. She wasn't nervous. She was focused. Her mother, Lisa, squeezed her daughter's hand 3 times. It was their secret code. 3 squeezes meant, "I love you." Maya squeezed back 4 times, which meant, "I love you too." They had traveled since 5 in the morning to get here, taking 2 buses and a train from their small town. Lisa worked double shifts at the diner to pay for Maya's piano lessons. Every penny counted. Every sacrifice mattered. Around them, other parents exchanged competitive glances, sizing up the competition. One mother whispered to another loud enough for others to hear, "Did you see the kid from the music academy? Apparently, he's been training with a teacher who charges $300 an hour." Another parent chimed in, "Well, my daughter has performed at the state capitol twice already." Maya turned her head slightly toward the voices, listening. She had learned to read rooms through sound. The clicking of expensive shoes on marble, the rustle of designer clothes, the confidence in people's voices when they knew they belonged somewhere. She and her mother didn't quite fit into this world, but they were here anyway. The waiting area gradually filled up. Teenagers tuned violins. A boy no older than 10 practiced breathing exercises for his flute performance. Parents checked their watches anxiously. Competition staff members walked around with clipboards, checking names off lists and directing people to different areas. The energy shifted every few minutes as another contestant was called to perform. Then the atmosphere changed completely. The main doors opened, and a woman entered the hall. She moved like she owned the place, her heels clicking with authority against the floor. Her black dress was elegant and expensive. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect bun. She wore diamond earrings that caught the light with every turn of her head. This was Christine Belmont, and if you knew anything about classical piano, you knew exactly who she was. Christine had performed at Carnegie Hall. She had toured across Europe and Asia. Critics called her, technically, flawless and emotionally commanding. She had released 4 albums, each one praised by music magazines. She taught at the Eastwood Conservatory, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Only the most talented students were accepted there, and only the wealthiest could afford it. But Christine was also known for something else. She had a reputation for being brutally honest, which was a polite way of saying she could be cruel. Students had left her master classes in tears. Fellow judges sometimes looked uncomfortable when she delivered her critiques. She didn't believe in sugarcoating anything. Excellence was excellence, she often said, and anything less deserved to be called out. Christine took her seat at the judges' table in the front of the auditorium. 2 other judges sat beside her, but everyone knew she was the one who mattered. She opened her leather portfolio and began reviewing the list of contestants. Her perfectly manicured finger ran down the names, pausing occasionally. When she reached Maya's name, she noticed a small note beside it. Accommodations required, visual impairment. Her jaw tightened slightly. She leaned toward the judge sitting next to her, a kind-looking elderly man named Professor Mitchell, and spoke in what she probably thought was a whisper, but was actually quite audible. "Another charity case," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Why do they keep doing this? This is a serious competition, not a feel-good television special. We're here to find real talent, not to make people feel better about themselves." Professor Mitchell shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. He had worked with Christine before and knew that arguing with her was pointless. In the waiting area, Lisa felt her whole body go rigid. She had heard every word. Her face flushed red and her hands clenched into fists. She looked at Maya, praying her daughter hadn't caught it, but Maya's expression had changed. Her jaw was set in a way Lisa recognized. Maya had definitely heard. "Mom, Maya whispered. "It's okay. I'm used to it." Those words broke Lisa's heart more than Christine's comment had. Her 12-year-old daughter was used to being dismissed. Used to people assuming she couldn't do things. Used to being seen as a sympathy case rather than a serious musician. What kind of world had they created where a child had to develop that kind of armor? The competition began. One by one, young musicians took the stage. A violinist played Vivaldi with impressive technique but little emotion. A cellist performed beautifully, but made a few noticeable mistakes in the difficult middle section. A pianist played Chopin competently, earning polite applause. Christine's critiques were harsh but fair for most of them. She praised technical skill when she saw it and pointed out errors without mercy. Finally, after what felt like hours, they called Maya's number. Maya stood up smoothly, unfolding her cane with practiced ease. Lisa walked beside her toward the stage entrance, but Maya would make the walk to the piano alone. That was important to her. She had insisted on it. As they approached, they had to pass right by the judges' table. Christine looked up from her notes. Her eyes traveled from Maya's face to the white cane, and something like annoyance crossed her features. She made a show of checking her expensive watch as if Maya's very presence was already wasting her time. Maya made her way up the steps to the stage, her cane tapping gently. She had memorized these steps during the brief practice session earlier. 7 steps up, turn right, 12 steps forward to the piano. She moved with quiet confidence, and when she reached the piano bench, she folded her cane and set it carefully to the side. The audience watched in complete silence. Some people looked genuinely curious. Others seemed uncomfortable, as if they weren't sure whether to hope she did well or to expect disappointment. A few parents exchanged glances that said, "Well, at least my kid will score higher than this one." Maya settled onto the bench. She adjusted her position slightly, her hands hovering over the keys. This was her moment of meditation, her way of centering herself. She had done this thousands of times in her small practice room at home, on the old upright piano her grandmother had left them. The keys under her fingers were like a familiar language, more natural to her than speaking. In the audience, Lisa gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She watched her daughter on that stage, looking so small and alone under the bright lights, and she prayed, not for victory, just for people to really listen. Christine leaned back in her chair, arms crossed over her chest. Her expression made her thoughts crystal clear. She had already decided this was going to be a waste of everyone's time. The pen in her hand was poised over her score sheet, ready to write numbers that had probably already been determined. "Whenever you're ready," Christine announced, her voice cold and flat. She didn't even try to hide the condescension. "Though I should mention we're running quite behind schedule today." The implication was obvious. "Make it quick." Maya's hands remained suspended over the keys. She took one slow, deep breath. In that moment, she made a decision. She wasn't going to play it safe. She wasn't going to choose something simple to prove she belonged here. She was going to play the piece she had prepared, the one her teacher had initially said was too advanced, the one she had spent 8 months mastering. She was going to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto number, 2 in C minor, and she was going to show them all exactly what a blind girl could do. Maya's fingers hovered above the piano keys, perfectly still. The concert hall had gone quiet, that special kind of silence that happens when hundreds of people hold their breath at the same time. She could feel the weight of all those eyes on her, watching, waiting, probably doubting. But Maya had learned long ago to tune out everything except the music living inside her head. She centered herself on the bench, adjusting her position just slightly. Her feet found the pedals beneath. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. This piano was different from her old upright at home, bigger and more responsive, but a piano was a piano. The keys would speak to her the same way they always did. In the judges section, Christine shifted impatiently in her chair. The movement was deliberate, loud enough to be noticed. She wanted everyone to know she was already bored, already convinced this was going to be a disaster. She picked up her pen and tapped it against her score sheet, the clicking sound echoing in the quiet hall. Professor Mitchell, sitting beside her, gave her a disapproving look. "Christine," he whispered, but she ignored him completely. Christine cleared her throat loudly. "We're waiting," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Sometime today would be wonderful. A few people in the audience gasped softly at the rudeness. Lisa felt her face burning with anger and embarrassment. She wanted to stand up and say something to defend her daughter, but Maya had made her promise before the competition. "No matter what happens, Mom, let me handle it. This is my performance." Maya remained calm on stage, but Christine wasn't finished. She looked down at her program, squinting at the small print, and then her eyebrows shot up in obvious disbelief. "I'm sorry, I need to clarify something," she said, standing up from her chair. The movement was dramatic, theatrical. Everyone turned to look at her. "Your performance piece," Christine continued, her voice dripping with skepticism. "According to this program, you're planning to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2? She said it the way someone might announce that a child claimed they could fly to the moon. "Is that correct?" Maya turned her head toward Christine's voice. "Yes, ma'am. That's correct." A murmur rippled through the audience. People who knew classical music understood exactly what that meant. Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto wasn't just difficult, it was legendarily challenging. Professional pianists spent years mastering it. The technical demands were extreme. The emotional complexity required maturity that most 12-year-olds simply didn't possess. It was the kind of piece you built toward over a lifetime of training. Christine let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "That's quite ambitious," she said. And the word ambitious sounded like an insult the way she said it. "Perhaps overly ambitious, wouldn't you say? Have you considered performing something more appropriate for your level? A Mozart sonata, perhaps? Something within reach?" The condescension in her voice was unmistakable now. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She was treating Maya like a foolish child who had wandered into something far beyond her understanding. Several other judges at the table looked uncomfortable. One woman actually put her hand over her face, embarrassed by her colleague's behavior. Professor Mitchell stood up, trying to intervene. "Christine, let's allow the contestant to perform the piece she's prepared. I'm simply trying to save everyone's time." Christine cut him off. She turned back to Maya, her expression almost pitying in its cruelty. "Look, I admire your courage, I really do. But this competition is about finding genuine talent, not about making people feel good. Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto is performed by world-class pianists at the peak of their careers. It requires not just technical ability, but deep emotional understanding. With all due respect, I think you might be setting yourself up for disappointment." The words hung in the air like poison. What Christine was really saying was clear to everyone in that room. She didn't think a blind 12-year-old from a small town could possibly have what it took. She had already decided Maya didn't belong here, that this was some kind of publicity stunt or misguided encouragement from well-meaning but unrealistic parents. In the audience, Lisa's hands trembled. Tears of frustration and rage filled her eyes. She had watched her daughter practice for hours every single day. She had seen Maya's fingers bleed from repetitive practice. She had heard her daughter play that piece so many times she could hum every note in her sleep. And now this woman, this famous pianist who had never spent 5 minutes with Maya, was dismissing all of that without even hearing a single note. But Maya's face remained absolutely calm. If anything, there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She had faced doubt her entire life. Teachers who suggested she try singing instead of piano because it would be easier for someone in her condition. Kids at school who assumed she couldn't do regular activities. Even some family members who whispered that Lisa was pushing Maya too hard, that she should accept limitations instead of fighting them. Maya had heard it all. And every single time she had proved them wrong. "I appreciate your concern," Maya said, her voice steady and clear. She spoke with a politeness that was almost startling given how rudely she had been treated. "But I've prepared this piece and I'd like to perform it, if that's acceptable." The last two words carried just the slightest edge. If that's acceptable. It was respectful but firm. She wasn't asking for permission. She was stating her intention. Christine's face flushed slightly. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by children. For a moment she seemed about to say something else, but Professor Mitchell put a firm hand on her arm. "Christine, sit down. Let her play." Christine made a show of sighing deeply as if they were all forcing her to endure some terrible ordeal. She sat back down in her chair with exaggerated slowness, crossed her arms over her chest, and made a point of checking her watch again. The message was clear. She expected this to be painful and brief. "Fine," Christine said, her voice flat and cold. "By all means, let's see what you can do. Though I should warn you, I've heard this piece performed by some of the greatest pianists alive. My standards are quite high. The threat was obvious. She was already preparing to tear Maya's performance apart. She had set the bar impossibly high on purpose. In her mind, there was no way this girl could meet it. Maya took a deep breath. Her hands lowered slowly toward the keys, her fingers finding their starting positions through muscle memory and countless hours of practice. She could feel the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. She could sense the weight of the piano, the way it would respond to her touch. Around the concert hall, people shifted in their seats. Some leaned forward with genuine curiosity. Others looked away, already uncomfortable, expecting to witness an embarrassing failure. A few parents smirked, relieved that their own children would look better by comparison. The tension was unbearable. Christine sat with her pen poised over her score sheet, ready to write down all the mistakes she expected to hear. Her expression was a mixture of impatience and smug certainty. She had already decided how this would go. The blind girl would struggle through the opening, make obvious errors, and eventually stop in embarrassed defeat. It would be awkward and uncomfortable, and then they could move on to serious contestants. She had no idea what was about to happen. Maya's fingers touched the keys. For one more second, there was absolute silence. The whole world seemed to pause, holding its breath, and then Maya began to play. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 exploded into the concert hall like thunder. The sound was massive, powerful, and absolutely perfect. Maya's hands moved across the keyboard with stunning precision, striking each note with exactly the right force, the right timing, the right emotional weight. Christine's pen froze in midair. Her mouth opened slightly in shock. The smug expression drained from her face as if someone had pulled a plug. Because what she was hearing was impossible. The music pouring from that piano wasn't just technically correct. It was extraordinary. It was the kind of playing that made your chest tighten and your breath catch. Maya's hands flew across the keys, navigating the complex passages with a fluidity that seemed to defy explanation. Her fingers moved so fast they blurred, yet every single note rang out clear and true. But the technical skill was only part of it. What made people's eyes widen in disbelief was the emotion. Maya played with a depth of feeling that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 12 years. The music swelled and crashed like ocean waves. It whispered and thundered. It ached with longing, then exploded with joy. Every phrase was shaped with perfect understanding of what Rachmaninoff had been trying to express. Around the concert hall, people stopped moving entirely. The restless shifting ceased. The quiet whispers died away. Every single person in that room was transfixed, unable to look away from the small figure at the piano. Professor Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. He had been judging music competitions for 40 years, and he had never seen anything like this, and Christine, who had been so certain just moments before, sat frozen in her chair, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her whole world was being turned upside down, and the performance had barely even started. Maya's fingers danced across the piano keys with breathtaking speed and precision. The opening section of Rachmaninoff's concerto demanded everything from a pianist. Complex chord progressions, lightning-fast runs up and down the keyboard, sudden shifts from thunderous power to delicate whispers. It was a piece that had humbled professional musicians twice her age, yet Maya played it as if the piano was simply an extension of her own body. The concert hall had transformed into something magical. Every person sat motionless, barely breathing. It was as if time itself had slowed down. A mother who had brought her son to compete forgot entirely about the competition. She just listened, her hand over her heart. One of the teenage contestants, a violinist who had been confident about winning, felt tears rolling down her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. The final notes of Rachmaninoff's masterpiece rang through the concert hall with stunning clarity. Maya's hands lifted from the keys slowly, almost reluctantly, as if breaking contact with something sacred. The last chord hung in the air, vibrating, echoing off the walls and high ceiling, filling every corner of the space with its resonance. And then gradually it faded into silence. For several long seconds nobody moved, nobody breathed. The silence was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the carpeted floor. It was as if the entire audience had been frozen in time, unable to process what they had just experienced. Maya sat perfectly still at the piano bench, her hands resting in her lap, a small smile on her face as she listened to that profound quiet. Then, from somewhere near the back of the hall, a single person stood up. The sound of the chair moving broke the spell. Another person rose, then another. Then suddenly, like a wave crashing onto shore, the entire audience was on their feet. The applause that erupted was deafening, overwhelming, the kind of raw emotional response that performers dream about their entire careers. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't the measured appreciation of a formal concert. This was something primal and real. People were clapping so hard their hands hurt. Some were shouting. Others were crying openly, not even trying to hide their tears. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder, growing louder and louder instead of fading away. Maya's smile grew wider. She turned her head slightly, trying to take it all in through sound alone. She had hoped people would like her performance, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The roar of applause seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding her, lifting her up. In the third row, a music teacher named Jennifer stood with tears streaming down her face, applauding until her palms stung. She had taught piano for 23 years. She had heard countless performances, but this was something else entirely. This was the kind of moment that reminded her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. She looked at her own students sitting nearby and saw their faces full of wonder and inspiration. The other young contestants were on their feet too, applauding with genuine enthusiasm, despite knowing their chances of winning had just evaporated. The violinist who had been so confident that morning clapped with tears in her eyes, feeling no jealousy at all. Just awe, just gratitude for being present for this moment. A boy who had played flute earlier in the day stood on his chair, whooping and cheering like he was at a rock concert instead of a classical music competition. Their parents, who had been so competitive just hours before, comparing their children's achievements and expensive training, now clapped with humility. They had just been reminded that real talent, the kind that takes your breath away, has nothing to do with money or privilege or connections. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere that can't be bought. Lisa pushed her way toward the stage, her vision blurred with tears of pride and relief and overwhelming emotion. She had sacrificed so much to give Maya this chance. The double shifts, the skipped meals, the constant worry about money. Every single sacrifice felt worth it in this moment. She reached the stage steps and saw Maya standing now, holding her white cane, facing the audience she couldn't see but could definitely hear. The applause continued for what felt like forever. People didn't want to stop. They wanted to keep showing their appreciation, their amazement, their gratitude for what they had just witnessed. Some audience members were embracing each other, strangers hugging like old friends, united by the shared experience of witnessing something extraordinary. Professor Mitchell stood at the judges' table, applauding with his arms raised high, tears running into his beard. He didn't care who saw him crying. He was 72 years old, and he had just heard something he knew he would remember until his dying day. This was what music was supposed to be. This was why it mattered. But all eyes eventually turned to Christine. She stood behind the judges' table, completely motionless. Her face was pale, almost gray. Tears streaked her carefully applied makeup, leaving dark trails down her cheeks. Her hands came together slowly to applaud, but the movement seemed almost painful, as if each clap was an acknowledgement of her own terrible mistake. She looked like someone who had just watched their entire worldview crumble into dust. Maya made her way carefully down the stage steps with Lisa's help, her cane tapping softly. As they passed by the judges' table, Christine did something that shocked everyone who knew her reputation. She stepped out from behind the table, moving to intercept them. Her expensive heels clicked on the floor, but her usual confident stride was gone. She moved hesitantly, unsurely. "Wait," Christine called out, her voice cracking. "Please wait." The word "please" from Christine Belmont's mouth was so rare that Professor Mitchell actually turned to stare at her. Lisa stopped, putting a protective arm around Maya's shoulders. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear whatever Christine had to say. The woman had been cruel enough already, but Maya turned toward Christine's voice, her face open and curious without any trace of anger or resentment. Christine stood there for a moment, seeming to struggle with words. This woman who always had cutting remarks ready, who never hesitated to deliver harsh critiques, now looked completely lost. The applause had finally started to die down and people were sitting back in their seats, but they watched this interaction with intense interest. You could feel the tension in the air. "I need to apologize to you," Christine finally said, her voice barely above a whisper but audible in the now quiet hall. She spoke to Maya, but everyone in the first 10 rows could hear. What I said before your performance was inexcusable. It was cruel and ignorant and completely wrong. Lisa's grip on Maya's shoulder tightened, but Maya remained calm and composed. Christine continued, her words coming faster now as if a dam had broken inside her. I have been a professional musician for 25 years. I have performed on stages all over the world. I have heard thousands of pianists from beginners to masters, and what you just did up there. Her voice broke completely. She had to stop and take several shaky breaths before she could continue. That was one of the finest performances I have ever witnessed. Not good for your age. Not impressive considering your circumstances. Just extraordinary. Period. What you did with that piece, the understanding you showed, the technical mastery, the emotional depth. Christine shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I am humbled. I am ashamed. And I am so sorry. The apology hung in the air. People in the audience exchanged glances. Some looked satisfied, others seemed skeptical. Christine Belmont wasn't exactly known for her humility or her apologies. This was unprecedented. Maya stood quietly for a moment, and then she did something that shocked everyone even more than Christine's apology. She smiled, a genuine warm smile, and said simply, "Thank you for saying that. But you don't need to apologize. Lots of people don't think blind people can do things. I'm pretty used to it by now." The matter-of-fact way Maya said it, without bitterness or self-pity, somehow made the moment even more powerful. This 12-year-old girl had more grace and maturity than most adults in that room. She had faced Christine's cruelty and responded not with anger but with understanding. I just wanted to show that I could do it, Maya added softly. That's all. I just wanted to play my music. Christine put her hand over her mouth, overcome with emotion. The simple dignity in Maya's words, the complete absence of resentment, made Christine's earlier behavior look even worse by comparison. Here was a child teaching an adult about grace and forgiveness. Lisa felt her own eyes welling up again. She was so proud of her daughter, not just for the incredible performance, but for the kind of person Maya was becoming. Despite all the doubters and the obstacles and the people who underestimated her, Maya remained kind and humble and focused on what mattered. Professor Mitchell approached them, his face still wet with tears but now smiling broadly. I think we can safely say that was the most remarkable performance in the history of this competition, he said, his voice warm. Young lady, you are an absolute marvel. Other judges gathered around, offering their congratulations. But Christine stood slightly apart, still processing everything. She watched Maya laugh at something Professor Mitchell said, watched her accept praise with genuine surprise and humility, watched her lean against her mother with complete trust and love. And Christine realized something that cut even deeper than her earlier shame. She had almost destroyed this. Her prejudice, her arrogance, her absolute certainty that she knew who deserved a chance and who didn't, had nearly prevented this performance from happening. If Maya had been less brave, less determined, she might have chosen to play something simpler when Christine questioned her choice. She might have let Christine's cruelty shake her confidence. The world would have been robbed of something beautiful because of Christine's narrow-mindedness. The competition organizer approached with a clipboard, trying to restore some order to the event. We still have several more contestants, she announced, though everyone knew the competition was essentially over. Nobody who performed after Maya stood a chance. It wasn't even close. As the audience settled back into their seats and the next contestant nervously took the stage, Christine returned to the judges' table. But she couldn't focus on the performances that followed. She kept thinking about Maya's words. I just wanted to show that I could do it. I just wanted to play my music. Such a simple dream. Such a pure motivation. And Christine had tried to crush it with her thoughtless cruelty. The competition results were announced 2 hours later, after all the remaining contestants had performed. Nobody was surprised when Maya's name was called as the winner. What was surprising was the score. The judges had awarded her a perfect 100 points across every category. In the 32-year history of the National Youth Music Competition, that had never happened before. Not once. Professor Mitchell stood at the podium to present the trophy, his voice still thick with emotion. In all my years of judging, I have never been more certain about a winner, he said, looking directly at Maya as she stood on stage with Lisa beside her. This young lady didn't just win a competition today. She reminded all of us what music is really about. She reminded us why it matters. The applause that followed was just as thunderous as before. Maya accepted the crystal trophy, running her fingers over its smooth surface to understand its shape. Her smile was radiant. But what happened after the official ceremony ended was even more significant than the win itself. Christine approached Maya and Lisa in the lobby as people were gathering their things to leave. She looked different somehow, smaller, less imposing. The armor of confidence and superiority she usually wore had been stripped away, leaving someone more human and vulnerable. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Christine asked, directing the question to Lisa as much as to Maya. Her tone was respectful, even hesitant. Lisa studied her for a long moment, still angry about the earlier humiliation, but eventually nodded. Christine knelt down slightly so she was closer to Maya's eye level, something the old Christine would never have done. "I meant what I said earlier," she began. "My apology was sincere, but I want to do more than just apologize. I want to do something meaningful to make up for my behavior." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I teach at the Eastwood Conservatory. It's one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. I would like to offer you a full scholarship, including private lessons with me if you're interested." Lisa's eyes widened. Eastwood Conservatory was the kind of place they couldn't dream of affording. Annual tuition was more than Lisa made in a year at the diner, but Maya's response was unexpected. "Thank you," she said politely. "That's really generous. But I'm happy with my teacher, Mr. Patterson. He's taught me everything I know. I don't want to leave him." Christine blinked in surprise. Most young musicians would have jumped at this opportunity without a second thought. "Mr. Patterson must be quite remarkable," she said slowly. "He is," Maya said simply. "He believed in me when nobody else did. He never treated me like I was different or limited. He just taught me music." Lisa felt tears prickling her eyes again. Mr. Patterson was a retired music teacher who lived 3 blocks from them. He charged $20 for an hour-long lesson, a fraction of what other teachers asked because he knew that was all they could afford. He had recognized Maya's talent immediately and had poured his heart into teaching her. Christine nodded slowly, understanding something important in that moment. Expensive schools and famous teachers didn't create talent like Maya's. Dedication did. Passion did. And teachers who truly cared about their students did. "Then perhaps I could visit occasionally," Christine suggested. "Not to replace Mr. Patterson, but to supplement his teaching. And there are other things I could help with. Connections to performance opportunities. Introductions to people in the classical music world. No strings attached, just a way for me to support your journey." Maya tilted her head, considering. Then she smiled. "That would be nice. Thank you." Over the following weeks and months, something remarkable happened. Christine kept her word. She traveled to Maya's small town once a month, working with both Maya and Mr. Patterson. The first time she met Mr. Patterson, a kind man in his 70s who taught piano in his modest living room, she understood immediately why Maya was so loyal to him. He was a gifted teacher who loved music for its own sake, not for fame or prestige. But Christine did more than just teach. She used her influence in ways she never had before. She started advocating loudly for young musicians with disabilities, arguing at conferences and in articles that the classical music world needed to tear down its barriers. She called out other prestigious institutions for their lack of accessibility and their unspoken biases. Some of her colleagues were shocked by this transformation. Christine Belmont, who had always been about excellence and standards above all else, was now talking about inclusion and opportunity. But those who knew what had happened at the competition understood. Maya hadn't just performed beautiful music that day. She had shattered Christine's entire worldview and rebuilt it into something better. Christine established a scholarship fund specifically for talented young musicians who faced significant barriers, whether financial or physical. She named it the Second Chances Fund as a reminder to herself that everyone deserved a chance, including herself. The fund provided not just money but also mentorship, instruments, and connections to performance opportunities. Maya continued to thrive. Her story spread through the classical music community, not as a feel-good tale about a disabled kid doing something cute, but as the emergence of a serious talent. She was invited to perform at regional concerts, then state-level events. Every performance left audiences amazed. But Maya remained remarkably grounded through it all. She still lived in the same small house, She still practiced on the old upright piano her grandmother had left them, though Christine had offered to buy her a grand piano many times. She still took lessons from Mr. Patterson, and she still helped her mom fold napkins at the diner on weekends. 2 years after the competition, Maya gave her first major solo concert at the Riverside Performing Arts Center, the same place where the competition had been held. The venue was packed. Every seat was filled. People stood in the back. Among the audience were many of the people who had witnessed her competition performance, including some of the young musicians she had competed against that day. Christine sat in the front row, not as a judge this time, but as a proud mentor and friend. She had insisted on sitting with the regular audience rather than in any special VIP section. As the lights dimmed and Maya walked onto the stage, her white cane tapping softly, Christine felt her chest tighten with emotion. Maya settled at the piano, that same serene smile on her face. She had grown taller in 2 years, but she still had that same peaceful confidence. The audience fell silent, waiting. "Good evening," Maya said, speaking to the audience before she played. This was something new. "I want to dedicate tonight's performance to everyone who has ever been told they can't do something, to everyone who has been underestimated or dismissed, and to all the teachers like Mr. Patterson who see potential in their students even when others don't." She paused, her fingers finding the keys. Music doesn't care if you can see or not. It doesn't care where you come from or how much money your family has. Music just cares if you love it enough to give it everything you have. So that's what I try to do every time I play. I give it everything. Christine felt tears rolling down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. Here was this 14-year-old girl teaching a room full of adults about what truly mattered. Maya began to play, and once again, the world stopped to listen. The piece she had chosen was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a beautiful and technically demanding work. As the haunting melody filled the concert hall, Christine closed her eyes and just listened. Really listened the way Maya had taught her to. She thought about the person she had been 2 years ago. Arrogant, quick to judge, so certain of her own superiority that Christine would never have stopped to hear the beauty in what Maya was creating. She would have been too busy looking for flaws, too focused on maintaining her own status to appreciate genuine artistry when it appeared in an unexpected package. Maya had given Christine so much more than that one incredible performance. She had given her a second chance to be a better person, a better teacher, a better human being. When the concert ended and the audience rose to their feet in another thunderous standing ovation, Christine applauded until her hands ached. She watched Maya take her bow, her face glowing with joy, and felt profound gratitude. Not just for the music, though, that was extraordinary, but for the lesson. Maya had taught her that the only real disability is a closed mind. That true vision has nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with heart. That genius and beauty and talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, if only we have the wisdom to recognize it instead of dismissing it. After the concert, as people crowded around Maya to congratulate her, Christine hung back. She didn't need to be at the center anymore. She was content to watch from a distance, proud of the small role she now played in Maya's journey. Lisa found Christine standing alone and walked over. "Thank you," Lisa said simply, "for everything you've done for her." "For us," Christine shook her head. "I should be thanking you. You raised an extraordinary daughter, and she taught me something I desperately needed to learn." "What's that?" Lisa asked. Christine smiled, a real genuine smile that reached her eyes. "That being wrong can be the best thing that ever happens to you, if you're brave enough to admit it and change." They stood together, watching Maya laugh and talk with her fans, completely at ease despite being the center of attention. A blind girl from a small town who had shocked everyone with her talent and grace, who had proven that greatness doesn't come from privilege or perfect circumstances. It comes from passion and dedication and the courage to pursue your dreams even when everyone tells you they're impossible. Maya's story didn't end that night, of course. It was really just beginning. But the lesson she taught had already changed lives, starting with the famous pianist who had once mocked her. And that change rippled outward, touching everyone who heard her play and learned to see the world a little differently. Sometimes the greatest performances happen off stage, in the moments when we choose to grow instead of defend, to open instead of close, to believe instead of doubt, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, A 12-year-old girl with a piano and a dream teaches us everything we need to know about what really matters.